It was 6 months.
6 months since the last time I initiated anything.
6 months since the last time I touched him first, suggested something, showed him I wanted to. And you know what's scariest? He never noticed. Not once. Not a single comment. Not a question. Nothing. And that's when I understood. I wasn't just stopping initiating. I was disappearing. And he didn't even see me go. I'm 41. We've been married for 14 years. 2 kids. A mortgage. The whole American dream package. And somewhere in there, I became invisible. Not all at once. It was gradual. So slow I didn't see it happening until it was already done. I remember the exact moment I decided to stop. It was a Tuesday night. The kids were asleep. I'd showered. Put on the pajamas he used to like. The ones that weren't just old t-shirts and sweatpants. I came to bed and he was already there, scrolling on his phone. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. He never looked up.
So I touched his shoulder, just a light touch, the way I used to.
He patted my hand.
Actually patted it, like you'd pat a dog.
Then went back to his phone. I laid there in the dark thinking, what if I just never do this again? What if I wait for him to notice? To reach for me first? To show me he still wants this. Still wants me.
That was 6 months ago. It started so differently.
When we first met, I was 27, he was 29. We couldn't keep our hands off each other. I'd initiate just as much as he did. More sometimes. I love that about us. That it wasn't just him pursuing and me accepting. We were equals in desire. I felt powerful in that. Wanted. Alive. The first year of marriage was still good. Different from dating, sure. More comfortable. But good. Then I got pregnant with our first. Everyone tells you pregnancy changes things. But they don't tell you how. They don't tell you that your body stops feeling like yours. That desire becomes this complicated thing tangled up with nausea and exhaustion and fear. I tried to keep initiating. I did. But it felt forced. Like I was performing being the wife I used to be. After our daughter was born, things got harder. My body had changed. Nothing fit right. Not my clothes. Not my skin. Definitely not my sense of self. I was touched out from breastfeeding all day. By the time the baby was asleep and we were alone, the last thing I wanted was more physical contact. But I tried. Because that's what you're supposed to do, right? Keep the marriage alive. Don't let yourself go. Don't become one of those women who uses kids as an excuse.
So I initiated, even when I didn't want to.
Even when my body felt like a stranger's. Even when all I wanted was sleep. I initiated because I thought that's what kept us connected. What made me a good wife? What proved I was still the woman he married? He always said yes. Always participated. But looking back now, I realize he never initiated anymore either. He just responded. Like it was another item on his to-do list.
Tuesday night, wife needs attention. Check.
I told myself it was normal. That all couples with young kids go through this. That we were just tired. That it would get better. Then I got pregnant again. Our son. 2 years after our daughter. And the cycle started over. Pregnancy, birth, breastfeeding, exhaustion, touched out. Trying anyway. Initiating out of obligation, not desire.
And him responding out of habit, not hunger.
I didn't know it then. But I was building a pattern.
I was teaching both of us that intimacy was my job. My responsibility to initiate, my burden to carry.
And he was learning that all he had to do was show up when asked. That he didn't need to pursue anymore. Didn't need to want me out loud. Because I'd always want him. Or at least I'd always act like I did. The kids got older. Things got easier in some ways, harder in others. I went back to work part-time when our son was 2. Suddenly, I was juggling a job, 2 kids, a house, and a marriage. I was tired all the time. That bone-deep tired that sleep doesn't fix. The kind that comes from giving pieces of yourself to everyone else until there's nothing left. But I still initiated. Less often, sure. Once a week became once every 2 weeks. Then once a month. But I was still the one. Still the one reaching across the bed. Still the one suggesting. Still the one trying to keep us alive in that way. And he kept responding, participating, but never initiating, never suggesting, never reaching first,
I told myself he was tired too. That he was working full-time, stressed about money, worried about his job. That I couldn't expect him to think about this on top of everything else. That someone had to keep the marriage going and that someone was me. What I didn't know then was how much resentment I was building. Every time I initiated and he just responded. Every time I made the effort and he just went along. Every time I tried to connect and he treated it like a chore. The resentment grew. Quiet, hidden, even from myself. I started to dread it. Not the intimacy itself. The initiating. The vulnerability of reaching out and not knowing if do you really want me or just agree because I asked. The performance of desire I didn't always feel. The weight of being solely responsible for this part of our marriage. So I started initiating less, testing. Seeing if he'd notice, if he'd step up. If he'd reach for me if I stopped reaching first. Weeks would go by. Nothing. I'd break. I'd initiate. He'd respond. We'd go back to normal. The normal where I was the only one trying. Then came the Tuesday night I already told you about. The last time. The pajamas. The shoulder touch. The pat, like a dog. I laid there thinking, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Can't be the only one who wants this. Who tries. Who cares? So I stopped. I thought he'd notice within a week. That surely after 14 years of marriage, after me being the one to initiate for most of them, he'd realize something was different. That I wasn't reaching anymore. Wasn't suggesting. Wasn't trying. I thought he'd ask. Or wonder. Or reach for me himself. Week 1, nothing. I told myself he was busy. Distracted. That he'd notice soon. Week 2, nothing. I started to worry. Started to wonder if I'd made a mistake. If I was being childish, playing games. Testing him unfairly. Week 3, nothing. The worry turned to hurt. He really wasn't noticing, wasn't missing it, wasn't missing me. By week 4, I was angry. How could he not notice? How could 4 weeks go by without intimacy and he didn't even question it? Didn't even wonder why. Month 2, still nothing. The anger turned to something colder. Sadness. The realization that maybe he was relieved. That maybe he'd been responding all these years out of obligation too. That maybe neither of us wanted this anymore, but I was the only one feeling guilty about it. Month 3. I started researching, reading, trying to understand. I found articles about desire discrepancy in long-term relationships. About responsive desire versus spontaneous desire. About how American women, especially mothers, often experience a shift in their desire patterns. How the mental load of managing a household affects libido. How touched-out mothers struggle with physical intimacy. I learned that what I was experiencing wasn't unusual. That studies show nearly 40% of women in long-term relationships experience periods of low desire. That it's even higher for mothers of young children. That the expectation for women to manage both the household and the intimate relationship while working and parenting is unsustainable. But none of the articles talked about what I was really feeling. The loneliness of being the only one trying. The hurt of being unnoticed. The fear that maybe my husband didn't want me anymore and was just too polite to say it. Month 4. I almost broke. Almost initiated just to end the silence. Just to feel wanted, even if it was fake. But I didn't, because I realized something. If I broke first, nothing would change. We'd go back to the pattern. Me initiating. Him responding. Me resenting. Him oblivious. I'd spent years building this dynamic. I needed to give it time to break. Month 5. I started wondering if we'd ever have intimacy again. If this was just our life now. Roommates raising kids. Polite, functional, but not connected, not in that way. And the scariest part was how easy it was, how little it seemed to affect our daily life. We still talked. Still laughed sometimes. Still managed the kids and the house and the bills. We just didn't touch, and he didn't even notice. Month 6. That's when I knew I had to say something. Because the experiment was over. The answer was clear. He wasn't going to notice. Wasn't going to initiate. Wasn't going to reach for me. If I wanted anything to change, I had to speak. Had to be vulnerable in a different way. Not through initiating, through talking. Through telling him the truth I'd been avoiding for half a year. I was terrified.
What if he said he was fine with how things were? What if he admitted he was relieved?
What if this conversation ended with us realizing we didn't want each other anymore?
But I also knew I couldn't keep living like this. Invisible. Unnoticed. Disappeared. So one night, after the kids were asleep, I told him.
I said, "We haven't been intimate in 6 months."
He looked shocked. Actually shocked. Like he genuinely had no idea. That hurt worse than I expected. 6 months, and he hadn't noticed. Hadn't counted. Hadn't missed it. I asked him why he never initiated. Why it was always me.
Why I'd stopped 6 months ago and he never once reached for me. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. He said he thought I didn't want it anymore.
That after I had kids, I seemed touched out. Exhausted. Like intimacy was another chore I was forcing myself to do. So he stopped asking. Stopped suggesting. Waited for me to initiate so he knew I actually wanted it. He thought he was being respectful, giving me space, letting me control when and if.
I sat there stunned. All this time I thought he didn't want me.
That he was relieved when I stopped initiating. When really, he was trying not to pressure me. Trying to let me lead because he thought that's what I wanted. We'd spent years misunderstanding each other. Both trying to be considerate. Both ending up hurt. I told him the truth. That yes, initiating when I was touched out and exhausted felt like a chore sometimes. But I did it anyway because I thought that's what kept us connected. What made me a good wife. That I needed to know he still wanted me. Still desired me. Not just when I asked. But on his own. That I needed him to initiate too.
To share the vulnerability, the responsibility, the risk of rejection.
He said he didn't know. That I always seemed so confident. So sure that he didn't realize I needed him to pursue me too.
That he'd gotten comfortable letting me lead because it was easier. Less scary. Less chance of rejection.
We sat there on the couch for an hour.
Maybe more. Talking in a way we hadn't in years.
Not about the kids or the bills or the schedule. About us, about how we both been feeling. Both been hurting. Both been misunderstanding. It wasn't a fix.
Wasn't a magic conversation that solved everything. But it was a start.
It's been 3 months since that conversation.
And I wish I could tell you everything is perfect now. That we figured it out.
That our intimacy is back to how it was when we first met.
But that's not how it works.
We're still figuring it out. Still learning. Still making mistakes. He initiates now. Sometimes, it's awkward at first. He's out of practice. I'm out of practice at being pursued. We're both self-conscious, both trying to unlearn years of patterns. But it's happening. Slowly, imperfectly, but it's happening. I still struggle with desire.
With the exhaustion of parenting and working and managing everything. With feeling touched out.
With my body not being what it used to be. But I'm learning that desire isn't something you either have or don't have. It's something you can cultivate. Create space for. Choose sometimes.
We're also learning that intimacy isn't just physical.
That we'd neglected emotional intimacy too.
That we'd stopped really talking. Really seeing each other.
That we'd become so focused on managing our life together that we forgot to actually live it together. What I can tell you is this.
Stopping initiating wasn't childish. It wasn't a game. It was the only way I knew how to show him that something was wrong. That I was disappearing.
That I needed him to see me. To want me.
To try.
If you're feeling what I felt, if you're the only one initiating, the only one trying, the only one keeping intimacy alive in your relationship, you're not broken. You're not demanding too much. And you're not alone.
So many American women are living this exact experience. Carrying the weight of intimacy while feeling invisible.
Wondering if they're the only ones who care.
The answer isn't to keep initiating out of obligation.
It isn't to perform desire you don't feel. But it also isn't to silently stop and hope your partner figures it out. It's to talk. To be vulnerable in a different way. To say out loud what you're feeling. What you're missing. What you need. It's terrifying.
I know,
but the alternative is slowly disappearing until there's nothing left.
Your desire matters.
Your needs matter. You matter.
And you deserve a partner who sees you. Who reaches for you. Who shares the vulnerability and the risk and the effort.
Not because you asked.
but because they want to.
Before I go, I need to be transparent with you.
This story was created with a thigh. The narrator, the specific details, the timeline, they're fictional.
But here's what's real.
The emotions, the struggles,
The questions.
this story represents the lived experiences of millions of American women. Women who felt exactly what you just heard. Women who thought they were alone. If this resonated with you, that's because the feelings are real. Even if this particular story isn't. Subscribe to Intimacy Vault for more stories that reflect what so many women go through but rarely talk about.